What's going on, everybody? Welcome to After Prison Show, and in this video I'm going to talk about when things go absolutely wrong. And with that, I'm going to be telling you about the worst of what can happen when in prison. There's been a lot of things going on in the world lately in relation to being locked up, and I'm going to use some of these stories to give you a better idea of just how crazy things can be when you're behind those razor wire fences. This first story I want to tell you about happened earlier this week at a prison called Northeast Correctional Center in Bowling Green, Missouri. And real quick, I want to give a special shout out to Lash Doll Divas on Instagram for bringing me a lot of information about this story. But it was at this prison in Bowling Green where this prisoner by the name of Jaredon Hutchins stabbed a female correctional officer at this prison more than 13 times in the head, in the hands, and thankfully and luckily this prison guard actually survived this attack. I mean, that's unbelievable to think about, being stabbed more than 13 times and being able to live through that. And I gotta be honest with you, I really don't have a lot of information about this story. Things are pretty tight and sealed in relation to this incident that occurred at this prison. But I will say this. No matter what this guy's issue was with this guard, if he even had an issue with this guard, I mean, this guy could have just been looking to do anything to anyone. Believe me, I've seen a lot of guys like that myself while locked up who are basically just looking for any and every opportunity to do something as drastic and as extreme as what this guy did, not to mention as violent. In fact, while I was in the jail waiting to go to prison, I remember this happened in a different cell block than where I was housed at. There was an incident that occurred that was a little similar to this, where a prisoner took a razor blade from a razor and slashed a guard in the jail across the throat. And luckily, in this guard's case, just as in this case in Bowling Green, Missouri, this guard was able to survive this attack. I will tell you this though, I can remember when this occurred, and when it did, this alarm went off in the jail like somebody was breaking out. We had no idea what was going on. And then the next thing you know, moments later, you see this prisoner being literally hogtied and dragged through the hallways in front of our cell block. And at this point, we had no idea what this guy had done. I don't even know what happened to this guy after he did this, but I can guarantee you they probably beat the living shit out of this guy for doing what he did. And in this case in Bowling Green, Missouri, where this guy stabbed this female guard 13 times in the head and in the hands, you can bet the guards there probably did something very similar. And you know, it's stories like this one that just further prove how dangerous and violent things can be when you're behind those razor wire fences in a prison, no matter who you are. Whether you're a prisoner serving time at that place or you're somebody who works there. This next story I'm going to tell you is just as crazy as this first story I told you, if not even more crazy. And to be honest with you, every story that I'm going to be telling you about in this video, it's probably crazier than the last, including the very last story I will be telling you about. But this story happened on July 20th in Michigan at a maximum security prison. And at this maximum security prison, there was a prisoner being housed there by the name of Rodriguez Burks, who actually was killed by his cellmate. Now, when you hear something like this, it probably doesn't even sound all that surprising or shocking. When you think about people being locked up and you hear that one prisoner kills the guy that he shares a cell with, maybe that sounds like something that could happen that's just not all that surprising. But there are some very shocking circumstances that surround what just happened at this prison. Rodriguez Burks was a 23-year-old prisoner who was serving a 2 to 10 year sentence for fleeing and eluding the police. The first crazy thing about this story is that this guy was eligible for parole in just 9 months. So to think that in just 9 months from now, this guy could have been eligible to be released, yet on July 20th, he was killed in this prison by his cellmate. Now I have to throw this in here as well. Rodriguez Burks, he was gay. And the guy that he shared a cell with had a major issue with this. Now, they haven't released the name of this cellmate that actually killed Rodriguez Burks, but they did say that this guy was just recently transferred to this maximum security prison from a supermax prison, and he had already been housed at this maximum security prison with one other guy who also was gay. Now, there's no mention of how these two ended up being housed in the same cell together, and there's also no mention of how this guy who just got transferred from the supermax ended up getting out of the cell with the first cellmate that he had a problem with, who also was gay. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because the story says that this cellmate and Burks both went to at least 2 different guards, telling these guards, hey, you need to switch these housing assignments. I cannot be in the cell with this guy. And the cellmate who actually killed Burks told at least one of those guards, if you do not move this guy out of my cell, I'm gonna hurt him. Both of the guards that were told about this situation did absolutely nothing about this. And even worse, these two prisoners both went to the unit manager of that cell block, the person who is really in charge of the cell assignments of all of the prisoners, and told this unit manager the same thing as well. And the unit manager went on to say that you're not here for your convenience. We're not moving you because you want to move. This isn't the Holiday Inn. And with the fact that these two prisoners were not reassigned to different cells, this incident ended up happening where Rodriguez Burks, only 23 years old, was killed by his cellmate. Now, I gotta be honest with you, this is a story that I completely do not understand at all. Because if a prisoner goes to either the guards or especially the unit manager and tells them that they have a problem with the person that they're sharing a cell with, in every single case that I've ever seen personally myself, those prisoners are separated and moved to different cells. So I have no idea why in this particular case these two individuals weren't moved. Everything should have been taken into consideration with this. The fact that this guy was just recently transferred from a supermax to this max, and he's also telling guards that if you don't move this other prisoner, he's gonna hurt him. All of this should have been taken into consideration, and these two prisoners should have definitely been separated. The only thing that I can even think about this is because of the fact that this guy who came from the supermax already had one other cellie that he got out of the cell with. I don't know, maybe that was the reason why they didn't want to reassign this guy another cellie. Just thinking that he was just constantly going to the guards and to the unit manager saying, hey, I can't stand this guy, get him out of my cell. Maybe they weren't taking, obviously these guards and unit manager weren't taking these threats seriously. And because they didn't, Rodriguez Burks lost his life because of this. Now, this next story didn't happen as recently as these other two that I've told you thus far. This actually happened back in July of 2015. And during this time, I mean, this is completely irrelevant, but during this time, I was actually still in prison myself. But this case that I want to tell you about, where basically the guards in this jail were filming everything that happened, which led up to what ultimately happened to this prisoner by the name of Michael Sabby. And again, this is a case of a prisoner's cry for help basically falling on deaf ears and not being acknowledged or taken as serious as it should be. And in this case, it's not a cell assignment, but it's actually a medical emergency that's not taken serious at all. In fact, I just recently watched the video of this and it is just absolutely insane. The video starts off showing Michael Sabby being escorted back to his cell by a prison guard, and then all of a sudden he just stops and puts his hand on the wall. And obviously this prison guard comes up to him, tells him, hey, keep moving. And I guess it's during this time that Michael Sabby's telling him, hey, I cannot breathe. And I don't know what makes this guard do this, but then all of a sudden this guard absolutely slams Michael Sabby on the ground, gets to wrestling with this guy. All the while, Michael Sabby is screaming that he cannot breathe. Other guards come into this situation. By this point, there's audio on this video. The video actually starts off with just camera footage from inside of the jail, and then it's picked up again by a guard actually filming this, talking about the date, talking about what the incident is that's occurring right here. And again, there's audio on this, so you can hear Michael Sabby telling all of these guards who are beating him up at this time that he cannot breathe. Now, what these guards end up doing next is absolutely just unbelievable, but they just start macing this guy. And if you've ever had mace sprayed in your face or pepper spray, or ever even been around anywhere where pepper spray is sprayed, you know that when you start breathing that in, that makes your breathing even more difficult. So imagine being in jail with a medical emergency, telling the guards that you can't breathe, and all of a sudden they just start pepper spraying you. And you know, unfortunately, this happens a lot more than ever really gets talked about. Medical emergencies inside of a jail or an institution that are not taken seriously and end up having like the ultimate repercussions from them. In this Michael Sabby case, he is eventually taken to medical, and while at medical, I mean, they've got the camera footage to prove this, they do absolutely nothing for him except have a nurse sit right in front of him telling him to calm down. He's never taken to the hospital, emergency services are never called. In fact, what they end up doing is just telling him, hey, calm down. And then from there, he's taken back to his cell, thrown in a cell, and then it's the next morning where he's discovered to be dead. You know, people ask me all the time what medical is like while locked up. Do you receive adequate medical attention and services while behind bars? And the truth of the matter is that in some cases, no, you don't. As is in this case involving Michael Sabby, again, this is something that happens a lot more than ever really gets mentioned. And that's because in a lot of cases, prisoners' cries for help, no matter what those cries for help are not taken seriously. This last story I want to tell you about is about as bad as it gets. And this just happened down in Louisiana. It happened on Thursday, as a matter of fact. And there was a prisoner down there by the name of Deltra Henderson who escaped from a prison and ended up going and murdering the stepdaughter of the assistant warden of that prison. And this is an absolutely despicable and heartbreaking case right here. I can just imagine how this affects anybody who works inside of a jail or a prison or in law enforcement when you hear a story like this, hearing of a family member being murdered because of where you work at and a prisoner who is housed at that place where you work. I mean, this is just an unbelievably tragic case, and it's things like this that you never want to hear about at all. No matter what your stance or view on people of law enforcement or people in corrections, what you think about the guards or anything like that. So what if you can't stand them? But to actually go out there and commit such a violent act or any sort of violent act as what this guy Deltra Henderson did down in Louisiana, I mean, this is absolutely fucking despicable. And this guy didn't end up staying on the run for very long because he was actually tracked down and found to be hiding inside of a vacant house somewhere near the prison where he had escaped from. And when he was found, some sort of gunfire exchange between him and officers who were there, and ultimately they shot and killed this guy. And I gotta be honest with you, I feel this guy got exactly what he deserved. An absolutely tragic and horrific situation that just took place down in Louisiana. And I just want to say, from After Prison Show to the families affected by this tragedy, my condolences go out to them. You know, you got to keep in mind that while in jail or in prison, you're going to be surrounded by the worst of the worst. And being in a situation like that, no matter whether you work there or whether you're in prison there, things can most certainly go absolutely wrong. And in all of these stories that we've just talked about here today, unfortunately, these stories most certainly prove that. Hey, look, that's it. I hope you got something from this video, and if you did so, please leave a like and a comment letting me know exactly what you thought about it. As always, until next time, enjoy life, the free world. Never take a moment for granted, and make the most of every day.